At 11 in the morning, deep inside Balmoral, the king pinned a star on the chest of his sister's husband. No press, no politicians, no vote, just Charles choosing. And honestly, anyone who understands the palace knew at once this was never really about the husband. It was a message about the sister. The quiet ones remember. And with one small gesture, the king told the whole institution exactly who he leans on now. Now hold on. To see why that tiny ceremony mattered, you have to go back to a grey London morning in 1997. A coffin moving slowly down the Mall, a boy of 15 walking behind it in front of the entire world, and a single white card resting on the flowers, written by hand, that said only one word. Hold that image, we will come back to that boy. Let me take you to where the wound began. On the 29th of July 1981, Charles married Diana at St. Paul's Cathedral. The whole planet watched. It looked like a fairy tale. It was not. Because there was a third person in that marriage from the very start. Her name was Camilla. Diana knew. She felt it in the silences. She felt it in the phone calls she was not meant to overhear. For years she was told she was imagining things. For years she was called difficult, fragile, paranoid. And honestly, that is the cruelest trick a family can play, to wound someone and then blame them for noticing the wound. The marriage curdled in public slowly on the front pages. They separated in December of 1992. The divorce was finalised in August of 1996. And in between came the confession nobody forgot. In a televised interview in 1994, Charles admitted to the country that he had been unfaithful. People sat in their living rooms and let it sink in. The fairy tale ended on camera in front of everyone, with the lights still on. Here is the part that still stings the most. Diana was not simply outnumbered by one woman. She was outnumbered by a whole arrangement that had been humming along for years before her wedding dress was even stitched. Camilla had history inside that world going back to the early 1970s. The same country weekends, the same horses, the same long, easy friendships a young outsider could never break into. Diana walked into a marriage that was already crowded with other people's loyalties, and the people who built that crowd never paid for it. Not then. The thing is, palaces keep very long memories, even while their faces stay perfectly still. There is one image of Diana I cannot shake. Near the end of it all, exhausted, hollowed out, she still knelt to meet sick children at eye level. She still took the hands others were too frightened to touch. She turned her private pain into public tenderness. That was her genius, and they could never take it from her. If you watch that interview in 1995, you remember the stillness in the room when she said, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. You remember exactly where you were sitting. You remember the silence in your own house afterward. Now look, obviously we cannot climb inside that family and verify every private feeling. None of it has ever been laid out by the palace in plain words. But what is documented speaks for itself. The dates, the interviews, the slow public collapse. And here is the thing most channels skip. Somebody inside that family watched every minute of it, said nothing at all, and forgot nothing, that somebody was his sister. William was 15 years old when he walked behind his mother's coffin. 15, an age when most boys are arguing about football and fizzy drinks. He did it with the world's cameras inches from his face and his expression like carved stone. People who were near him in those days say the grief never actually left. It just went underground. It hardened into patience. He did not rage. He did not give wounded interviews. He waited the way a disciplined man waits, learning every corridor of the institution that had failed his mother. And honestly, the patient ones are the people you should never bet against. Then there is Anne. Forget the fame for a moment and look at the actual woman. Direct to the edge of bluntness, devoted to horses, to early mornings, to discipline, to simply turning up when it rains. So like her father, Prince Philip, that people who knew them both said it constantly. And here is the fact that runs quietly under this entire story like a wire under a floor. Before Andrew Parker Bowles married Camilla in 1973 at the Guards Chapel in London, he had once been close to Anne herself. It ended without scandal. Both of them moved on cleanly, but the social map never quite redrew itself. Anne knew that circle from the inside years before Camilla ever stood beside her brother. This is a woman with steel most people never see. In 1974, on the Mole, just yards from Buckingham Palace, a man tried to drag her from her car at gunpoint in an attempted kidnapping. She refused to go. She stared him down. 2 years later, in 1976, she rode for Britain at the Montreal Olympics in the equestrian three-day event, the first British royal ever to compete at the Games. Then came the decades of work nobody applauds. Colonel of the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards since 1995. Colonel of the Blues and Royals since 1998. Years with Save the Children that involved real field visits, not photographs. That is the woman Charles put at his back. Now follow the structure, because this is where the patient plan turns mechanical. When Charles became king in September of 2022, he made a deliberate choice. He shrank the firm, fewer working royals, a smaller, tighter group the household quietly calls the short bench. On paper it reads as efficiency. In practice it means the few who remain must carry everything, and nobody carries more than Anne. In 2023, she completed 457 official engagements, more than the king managed that same year. At the coronation on the 6th of May 2023, she rode directly behind the gold coach as gold stick in waiting, the historic role of the sovereign's most trusted protector. That is not a courtesy handed out to keep someone happy. That is a declaration. The quiet ones remember, and the king placed the one who remembers everything directly at his spine. Honestly, look at what that arrangement actually means when you say it plainly. Camilla won the wedding, Anne won the monarchy. Now, we cannot claim the king sat down with a map and plotted any of this against anyone. Royal gossip has a habit of turning a coincidence into a grand conspiracy. But a pattern is still a pattern. The family contracted, and the woman who rose to its dead centre was the one person who never needed Camilla for anything at all. And honestly, this is where it stops being old family tension and starts becoming something colder, quieter, and far more permanent. So let me take you back to Balmoral, and let me slow the whole thing right down. The setting was private by design. A castle in the Highlands, family ground, the one place the family goes specifically to be unwatched. There, in front of a small gathering, the king chose to elevate his sister's husband, Sir Timothy Laurence, to Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order, one of the highest personal honours in his gift. Remember who Timothy is. He married Anne in December of 1992 and has stood beside her, low profile and steady, for more than 3 decades. There was no announcement engine, no politician signed off on it, just the sovereign, deciding who gets honoured inside the most private walls he owns. And the house he chose to honour was his sister's. Here is the scene people keep circling back to. At about 11 that morning, the Star of the Order caught the dull Highland light as it was fixed to Timothy's chest. And across that quiet room, Anne did not smile. She did not speak. She did not perform a single thing for anyone. She gave one small nod. That was all. One nod, and the whole institution understood the ledger had finally been settled in her favour. A nod can say far more than a speech when the person giving it has waited 50 years to be proven right. There is a line people in that world swear sounds exactly like her. According to one version that circulates among household staff, when the subject of who can truly be trusted comes up, Anne has reportedly said something to the effect of 5 plain words: loyalty is never for sale. Whether she said it in that room or ever, we honestly cannot confirm. But anyone who has watched her for 50 years will tell you it sounds precisely like her, because she has always said exactly what she means and then nothing more. And Camilla? Set the fragility of her position against the permanence of Anne's. Camilla's standing in that family has always rested on one single thing: her marriage. Anne's standing rests on 5 decades of work the institution simply cannot replace. If the room read that ceremony the way some long-time observers suggest it did, then the message was unmistakable, even though no one said a word out loud. Now look, we cannot pretend to climb inside anyone's head, and not one frozen expression has ever been confirmed. But the structure itself does not lie. The wedding made Camilla a queen. It never once made her essential. And here is the twist I genuinely did not see coming, the one that only lands after you think the story is finished. Everyone assumed Charles would always tilt the board toward Camilla, always shield her place above everything and everyone. He did the opposite, and he may not even have intended it. By building the short bench, by shrinking the family down to the handful who actually carry it, the king quietly handed the centre of his entire reign to the one woman who was never close to his wife. He did not have to choose against Camilla. The arithmetic chose for him. He simply trusted the work, and the work belonged to Anne. Whether every shade of this reading is accurate, honestly, none of us can swear to it. The palace will never narrate its own private decisions out loud, and it never has. But what is on the record stands entirely on its own. The honour was real. The engagement count is real. Goldstick was real. The shrinking of the firm was real. Lay those 4 facts side by side and the picture assembles itself without anyone needing to whisper a single thing. So in the end, this was never the loud story. No headlines screaming her name, no scandals. No tears on camera for the nation to consume. There was only a woman who kept showing up year after year, decade after decade, while the noisy ones rose and fell all around her. The throne does not keep the loud, it keeps the loyal. Diana was failed by a family that could not protect her when it mattered most. But that same family has slowly, silently rearranged itself around the people who never once wavered. The quiet ones remember. And now, at last, so does the crown. Tell me in the comments, where were you in August of 1997, the morning that boy of 15 walked behind his mother's coffin?